In this lecture, we're going to focus on how precision nutrition can be applied to reproductive health. We'll be looking specifically at the science behind it, the mechanisms connecting metabolism, epigenetics, and of course, reproductive function in both women and men. Okay, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll set up the core problem connecting metabolism and reproduction. Then we'll get into some key concepts, PCOS and something called paternal programming. After that, we'll look at how nutrition influences these systems, walk through a fascinating case study on the sperm epigenome, and then cover some common mistakes in applying this knowledge. We'll wrap it all up with a summary and a few questions to test your understanding. So, what's the fundamental challenge we're talking about? It all comes down to this: metabolic health and reproductive function are tied together. You can almost think of them as being on a seesaw. When one is out of balance, the other is deeply affected. And when metabolic homeostasis gets thrown off, fertility is often one of the very first systems to show signs of trouble for both men and women. Let's start with the female side of the equation. A perfect example of this connection is polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. It's the single most common reproductive disorder in women. Clinically, it's defined by a trio of symptoms: the accumulation of abdominal fat, what's called hyperandrogenism, which is an excess of androgens, and insulin resistance. Now, it's important to know that PCOS isn't just one single thing. It's not monolithic. We can break it down into at least two different subtypes. There's the reproductive endocrine subtype, which we'll see with specific hormone profiles, higher LH and SHBG, and often a lower BMI. Then there's the metabolic subtype, which is associated with a higher BMI and the higher levels of glucose and insulin. Making this distinction is absolutely crucial because the best way to manage the condition depends entirely on which subtype we're dealing with. Okay, now shifting to the male side, a concept that is central here is paternal epigenetic inheritance. What does this mean? It's the idea that information from a father's life, his diet, his metabolic state, can be passed on to his children. And this happens without changing the DNA sequence at all. Instead, it works by modifying gene expression through little chemical tags on the DNA. Think of it like footnotes on the genetic code. And this system is incredibly dynamic. So how exactly does a man's metabolic health impact his reproductive system? It all centers on something called the hypothalamus pituitary testis axis, or HPT axis. In men with obesity, you get two things: chronic inflammation and an excess of a hormone called leptin coming from fat tissue. Both of these act to suppress this entire hormonal pathway. The end result? Decreased production of testosterone. And just like we see the metabolic state affecting the male hormonal axis, it also plays a role in programming female cells, especially in a condition like PCOS. The fat tissue, the adipose tissue, in women with PCOS seems to be hardwired for exaggerated fat storage. This behavior at the cellular level is what drives the bigger, system-wide problems with glucose and insulin that define the metabolic subtype of PCOS. So how does this paternal transmission actually happen? We can break it down into 4 steps. First, the father's obesity is the environmental exposure. This exposure then alters the epigenome of his sperm. Third, at fertilization, this altered epigenetic information gets transmitted to the embryo. And fourth, this leads to modified gene expression in the child, especially in genes that are responsible for things like appetite control. Okay, so once we understand these mechanisms, the role of nutrition starts to make a lot of sense. Take the standard American diet, for example, which is high in refined carbs and trans fats. We see a clear association with a higher risk of infertility related to ovulation. On the flip side, what we might call a pro-fertility diet, one that's high in fiber, omega-3s, and protein from vegetables, is associated with a lower risk. And here's something important: the interventions don't always have to be drastic. For women whose fertility is impacted by inflammation linked to obesity, losing only 5% of their body weight can be enough. That modest change can reduce the chronic low-grade inflammation and, in many cases, restore ovulation. That's a huge clinical benefit for a relatively small change. Now, for men, we can get even more specific and look at certain bioactive compounds. Take selenium. It acts as an antioxidant, which helps reduce oxidative stress inside the sperm cells. Then you have omega-3 fatty acids. These improve mitochondrial energetics. Basically, they help the cell's powerhouses work more efficiently. Both of these things lead directly to better sperm quality. This brings us to a really key case study. It's a human study that gives us some powerful evidence for just how quickly the male epigenome can be reshaped when there's a major metabolic change. So what did the study do? Researchers followed a group of morbidly obese men who had bariatric surgery. They looked at the DNA methylation patterns in their sperm before the surgery and after, and the main finding was pretty incredible. there was a significant remodeling of the sperm's epigenome just 1 week after the surgery. That's an extremely rapid change. And what's even more fascinating is that these epigenetic changes weren't happening randomly all over the genome. No, the remodeling was concentrated in genes that are in charge of the central control of appetite. This points to a very direct mechanism for how a father's metabolic state could epigenetically program how his future children regulate their own appetite. This wasn't just a one-off finding either. We have parallel evidence from a different study that looked at endurance training. After 6 weeks of training, researchers found changes in the small RNAs carried by sperm. These are molecules that help fine-tune gene expression. They also saw altered methylation patterns at hotspots for genes involved in neurological development. All of this data helps us understand some common pitfalls when this science is applied in a clinical setting. The first big misconception is to see PCOS as only a reproductive issue. The correction here is to see it for what it is, a systemic metabolic disorder that has reproductive consequences, and that means its management has to be tailored to the specific subtype. A second common pitfall is underestimating the father's role. For a long time, the focus was almost entirely on the mother's health, but the evidence is clear now. The father's metabolic condition actively programs the child's epigenome, and this has long-term effects on things like appetite control and overall development. And finally, this brings us to a third misconception, the idea that there's one single fertility diet that works for everyone. That's simply not the case. What we need is precision nutrition. For any diet to be effective, it has to target the specific underlying issue, whether that's insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, or maybe oxidative stress. So let's quickly review the main concepts. First, metabolic health is the foundation for good reproductive function. Second, PCOS is fundamentally a metabolic disorder, and it has distinct phenotypes that we can act on. Third, the father's epigenome is not static, it's dynamic, and it passes metabolic information to the next generation. And last, by using targeted nutrition, we can actually modify reproductive outcomes because we're addressing these very specific mechanisms. To help you consolidate all of this, think about these 3 questions. 1. How does the underlying pathophysiology of the metabolic subtype of PCOS differ from the reproductive endocrine subtype? 2. Can you describe the specific epigenetic mechanism that allows a father's obesity to influence his child's appetite regulation? And 3, why is that 5% weight loss figure so often clinically significant for improving ovulation in women with obesity? And that wraps up this explainer. If you want more content like this, please subscribe to the channel and be sure to like this one to show your support. Thanks for joining me.